Good evening. I'm sitting with one of the most successful and at the same time, I guess, controversial figures in the American musical theater today, and that's Harold Prince. He started out as one of the youngest producers of Broadway successes 25 or so years ago, and shows like Pajama Game and Damn Yankees, Fiddler on the Roof. But his heart, it seems, always yearned toward directing. And since then, hardly a year has passed that some Broadway marquee hasn't had his name on it. Having directed that show, of course. So right at this moment, audiences are clamoring for seats to a couple of Harold Prince musicals on Broadway, Sweeney Todd, which added a 15th Tony to his already groaning mantelpiece, and Evita, which is still packing them in over in London, and here as well. Harold
And
Prince,
in California, if we're going to advertise.
Oh, and in California,
Sure.
too. Well, I don't know what more to tell you by way of introduction. I hope you saw my last show with him, in which we talked about the fact that his shows contain such subjects as butchering barbers to imperialists to rising Nazis and fascists. He'd go out humming the melancholy or something, I don't know. Anyway, we did one show together. It was lively, and we have had him back tonight. So, long-windedly again, will you welcome Harold Prince? I don't see that there's anything left for you to say.
I was going to say,
at this point.
it's over.
Yeah, that's it. You didn't bring a chessboard or anything, did you?
I can't play chess. I have no hobbies whatsoever.
Is that so?
Thought I'd ask me that question. I have none.
Darn. Well, there goes 50% of this. The reviewers are still, well, I read a whole package of reviews of Evita, and it was as if they were talking about several different shows. Once again, it's the same thing. Some people think you, one particular critic thinks that you are glorifying an opportunist and almost ought to be ridden out of town for this dastardly act. And someone else is relieved to find that you at least weren't glorifying an opportunist.
That's a good thing. If you can't get them to love, all of them to love you, the controversy is what makes the show a hit, really. Honestly, yeah. It's awfully hard to get them all to love you. Yeah. It seems absurd to me that anybody would misunderstand what Evita's about. In a sentence, it's neither about glorification or not glorification. It's about the pernicious accomplishments of media and manipulating the public. And there are often times when I think I haven't a clue what that person is like that is on the cover of all those magazines and so on. And the opportunity to find out for yourself is so rare. I think you can, in a word or a couple, Lottie Lenya went to see Evita sometime after it opened, and she called me the next day railing about the reviews that didn't get it. And she said, it's so clear. I haven't seen anything, I haven't seen an audience manipulated that way, nor have I been, since I saw what was happening to people in Nuremberg, since I saw what happened, when Lenya and Kurt Weill escaped Germany. That's the way people, it was a very sophisticated process. And at the end of the first act of Evita, what we do, and I think we frequently accomplish it, we just get an audience worked up there, and then the curtain comes down, you sit there and say, my God, what have I just experienced, and what do I think of what they were just saying? And that's a good thing, because it's a warning, I think.
Has it occurred to you that you have the power to be a malevolent dictator and tyrant by the ability to do that?
If the words are right. If the words are right. If the words are right, somebody's got to write those words. But then I guess somebody writes most of those dictators' words anyway. Yeah.
Would you talk a bit about Stephen Sondheim? Obviously a genius. I think we can safely say that. If he had only given us Send in the Clown, I suppose, you say he's earned his keep. But I read that he often doesn't have the score ready by the time you're doing...
Well, that's the truth.
By the time you get to rehearsal, even.
That has been true. That has been true. It was not true in the case of Sweeney Todd, because frankly, I said, I think we have to stop going into rehearsal with numbers missing. That's being very generous on my part, because one of the shows went in with little more than half a score, and I ended up staging scenes that were going to be musicalized, and then he'd come look at them and go home and write the most exquisite musical scenes to go with absurd dialogue that actors and I had bandied about, you know. Here's a letter, thank you. It's an invitation to a party. Oh, I don't know whether I will go or not. That kind of banality. And then he turned that into a swell song called A Weekend in the Country. But the fact is that there's a very bad policy. I think it's hurt some of the earlier shows we did because you never had time for things to get digested, ingested. You know, you never had a chance to polish, because you were working right up to a deadline. An opening night deadline. The thing about Sweeney is I said we must never do that again, and so in Sweeney he delivered the whole thing, and I think maybe that's why it's such a success. I think that's helped a lot because the show has a kind of totality that maybe some of the earlier work didn't. It was a great pleasure to have all the material before we started.
But it's also valuable to have the ability to say, I need a song here, and you can get it from him.
He works very well under pressure. The trouble is that there can be too much pressure. And I'd much rather, you know, the thing about a show, I think, is that you should go in thinking it's perfect. Not in the old days when things weren't as costly and there was much more time to accomplish plays in rehearsal time and so on. It was okay to say, well, I really don't think that's going to work, but when we get on the road, we'll figure out how to fix it. Something will come to mind. Things were perhaps not as polished as they are now. Audiences not as demanding, and so on. Today, it seems to me you should go in thinking you've solved all the problems because you know you haven't. And the day after you play the show in front of an audience, you'll find out that there's a problem somewhere where you least expected it. And then he has to go, if it's musical, and write another song. Better that it should come that way than going in knowing that you're lacking 4 or 5 numbers. It's not practical.
You haven't fought over this, I gather.
No, we dealt with it.
Yeah.
I just didn't go into rehearsal till he was finished. We don't fight. We don't fight. I don't fight in the theater. I really do not think that a successful play is the reason for living. I don't think that each play is the most important thing, and you can destroy your personal life, lose your friends. You know, it seems silly to me. It's just a play, and there'll be another play after it, and I dedicate a lot of my time and love and emotions to the success of a play. But, I mean, there'll be another play, and it seems silly to think of it differently.
Maybe not one with Oriental actors, though. Huh?
I think that was costly. They were wonderful.
Yeah.
That was a lot to ask of an audience.
I should explain what we're referring to, but you did a show called Pacific Overtures, which required a number of Oriental actors who turned out to be not that available.
Well, that was the problem, was finding people.
Yeah.
But when we found them, they were terrific, and we did find them, and we did the show with an all-Asian cast. The problems with that show had to do with a lot of elements being too exotic, truly exotic for an audience to assimilate. It was a historical story about the acculturation of Japan by the Americans, so we were the villains. It was done with an all-Asian cast in the kabuki style, a very unfamiliar theatrical style, with all men playing women's roles as they do in the kabuki theater. That's a bit too much to ask of an audience. On the other hand, I have to tell you, it never occurred to me that it was a bit too much to ask of an audience until we'd closed.
There's a certain wonderful, wonderful madness in that, really.
I think it informs working in the theater. There's a wonderful madness in working in the theater. And in fact, we ran for 6 months here and another 6 in California, where it was a big hit, where there is an Asian population, so it didn't seem as exotic an experience. It was worth it. We're going to do it again in Europe. Yeah. We're going to do it in London in 1981. This is going to be out before then, isn't it?
Yes, this is what we're doing now. Yeah. But I gather in New York you just Did you have people pretending to be Oriental and people with jaundice sneaking into rehearsals and
No, but you're on to
anything
something. We had one nice Greek fellow who told me that he was an eighth Asian, but it wasn't true. But we were desperate to fill the cast, you see. So I grabbed that and we put that in the bio in the back of the program. Everybody was.
that he was an eighth?
But we had to be consistent. Yeah.
By the way, I gather the thing I referred to, your not being able to read music, is neither a sensitive point nor anything that's held you back. There are places you can go if you felt the need to.
I don't know that I could
to,
learn, to be absolutely honest with you. But it hasn't held me back. And I've been doing operas. I'm doing operas now, and you know, opera directors have the score, and they direct from the score with all that music there. Well, I can't read the music, and since I can't read the music, you turn so many pages before you've gotten through 2 lines of dialogue, you see, because all that music is cluttering up the pages. So I direct it with, I direct it with a script, as though there were no music attached to it, and a very adroit musical director right there who takes care of all that. It's a play. I seem to be daring you.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Well, it's as if you set out to do things that you couldn't possibly do, and you keep succeeding at them. Would be one way of looking at your life in the theater. It's amazing.
I don't know. I tell you, I'd like to say one thing to that.
Okay.
So I did a lecture in Maine just a few days ago, and somebody said, "How do you get to be a director?" And I said, "You say you're a director." Now, from then on, you're either a good one or a bad one. But it's as simple as that.
Once the shingle is out.
That's it. You're a writer. I mean, you can be a writer and no one ever have read your writings, but that doesn't mean you're not a writer. Some people want more from it than that. But
if the same people in your audience said to you, is the way to be a director or a producer to go into summer stock, would you head them in that direction? That's a traditional way.
yeah, well, I don't think so much anymore. First of all, summer stock as such that's re-identified. I think you're much better off in the regional theater,
Well.
which is all year round. And it isn't about, you know, summer stock used to be about stars coming and playing a show for the summer. Fine, you get into the trap of people coming in for that week to do that show, picking up bit players, throwing themselves on stage, and the quality is frequently less than it should be. And you, as the fellow who's learning to be the director, is in fact painting the scenery and looking for props in people's living rooms and so on to borrow them. That's another, I'm not sure there's so much to get out of that except a good summer. But certainly, there's a lot of experience to be gotten out of working in the regional theater anywhere. I don't even think so much of formal education, you see, in terms of the theater. I think vocal training, singing, movement, physical movement, fencing, exercising, that kind of thing, terrific. But mostly, I think, experience. I have to believe in that. That's where my life took me, practically.
Do you ever look back at something that didn't succeed and have, well, a special fondness for it? I'm trying to think of what was it that you...
Sure.
Yeah, and still think
sure.
I've got to take it. I owe it to bring it back and do it again.
Pacific Overtures. Steve and I
That's
both
what you
feel that way, and that's why. And John Weidman, and we're going to do it again in London. But possibly one ought to say I redefined success just in time. I mean, for years I used to refer to a successful play and mean one that had made money at the box office, and an unsuccessful play, one that hadn't. Yeah. And then suddenly one day, thanks totally to my wife, I redefined it. She said, "What are you talking about? Follies is a success." And then I look back and I think, but a new girl in town, which made money, is not a success. Once you've done that, that's very important, because I think that protects your work.
Well, what do you mean when you said it wasn't a success, though? It didn't satisfy you
I mean,
finally,
it wasn't artistically successful, not at the box office. I really think the box office is not a standard of success.